Greetings 12, this is Corbin Smith of the Emerald City Spectrum joining me post-practice to cover all that we saw and heard today at the VMAC. Dan Viens of the Seahawks Forever podcast. And Dan, we've got a lot to dive into today after day 2. I think we got to start though with talking about Sam Darnold and just what we've seen here these first couple days. And I can say this for being at OTAs, seeing some different stuff from him in terms of where he's at progress-wise in this offense.
Yeah, first of all, good to be here with you again, especially here on the field at the VMAC. Yeah, you know, I wasn't here for OTAs and minicamp, but one of the main storylines and one of the things that got fans wringing their hands a little bit were a couple of uneven days from him, reports of him holding onto the ball a little too long and throwing some interceptions in some of the periods. He did throw an interception today on a nice play by D'Anthony Bell, but I thought for the most part he really built off what I said last night on my show. Is I thought he looked quick, he looked decisive, accurate, and on time, and really, especially this early in camp, that's all you want to see out of your starting quarterback.
What I love is when he was talking to reporters after practice today, he was talking about using his feet and reading his feet. And what he's saying with that is understanding that if he hitches once, hitches twice, hitches 3 times, there has to be that internal clock that goes with his feet. And you're seeing that on the field from him right now. And there's a couple plays that jump out to me from the segments that I was able to watch today. There was a 25-yard post route to Cooper Kupp, and it was just a fantastic throw. And the ball was out of his hands before Kupp was even coming out of his break on the post route. It was good coverage, but he lofted it over the linebacker, and he was really decisive with his footwork, getting that football out. We're seeing that timing aspect really paying off for him right now. And whether he wants to downplay it or not, those 2 days they had in Southern California, that is manifesting on the field right now with his chemistry with receivers.
And A.J. Barner even referenced this. We got to talk to him after practice today about how a lot of times Darnold's timing is so good, and this is an offense predicated on timing, that the ball's out before the receiver makes his cut. I got a really good example of that as well today. Also, Cooper Kupp running an out route right at me, about a 15-yard breaker, and had the ball out. Sam did well before Kupp made his cut, turned around, ball was placed perfectly, waiting for him when he turned around.
Yeah, this was really a great practice for Cooper Kupp here on day 2. He had a number of really nice catches. Sam Darnold seemed to be looking for number 10. It's still catching me off guard, even though he wore 10 with the Rams. We're used to Uchenna Nwosu being that number, but he was running really crisp routes on curls and comebacks. He had a couple of out routes that he caught, that post pattern that he reeled in from Sam Darnold. Those two seem to have taken that chemistry to another level. And I want to talk about Steven Sims real quick. This is not a guy that's got the All-Pros and the Triple Crown to his name, but Steven Sims has been a revelation since OTAs and minicamp. He has kept it going here in the early going of training camp. Now, he was still playing with the 2s, but Drew Lock has delivered a couple absolute strikes to him along the sideline, and he's ran really crisp routes, reeled him in, got both feet down. 84 brings a little different style to the table than the other receivers Seattle has, and we know what he brings to the table as a kick and punt returner with his success in those avenues as an NFL player.
It's funny, we were thinking the same thing. Early in practice, he made a couple of catches, and I thought they're going to have a real hard time keeping him off this roster. And then later in practice, I ran into you, and it was one of the first things you said to me. So we were on the same wavelength, and that just speaks to the kind of day he had today.
Yeah. I think when you look at that receiving core, there's been so much discussion, no DK Metcalf, no Tyler Lockett, that this is going to be a weak point for this team. Maybe at the top in terms of star power, you can say that, but I think what we're seeing out there right now, even these first couple days of training camp, we are seeing the depth and the breadth of this group right now. Cody White is still getting a lot of big plays and nearly had a remarkable catch in yesterday's practice.
Yeah.
Tyrone Broden.
Right down there.
Yeah, Tyrone Broden, the undrafted rookie that's coming out of Arkansas, previously played at Bowling Green as well. He's 6'5", and he runs in the 4.3s. We're seeing that speed and that size here in these training camp practices. And so Broden's a player to keep an eye on. And then, of course, you got Derek Young, you got Jake Bobo. You've got a number of other wideouts, Steven Sims I mentioned. They're vying for like maybe 2 or 3 spots.
Yeah.
I think that this is a group that maybe it isn't as good at the top, but it's as good as we've seen in a long time in terms of overall depth and just the pure talent. A number of different types of receivers. We didn't even mention Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's done some nice things for them since coming to town as well.
Yeah, and the rookie Torrey Horton out here, he was doing everything today. Sam Darnold was asked about him, what his impressions are of him. First thing out of his mouth was speed. It's what he's known for, a 4.3 guy. But today I thought maybe the most impressive play for him was a deep post route caught a ball from Drew Lock in tight coverage in traffic, and it wasn't a pretty ball. It wasn't a great throw. It wasn't a great ball from Lock. It was wobbly. It was a duck. Tough ball to catch. Horton caught it in traffic, came down with it. Really impressive.
Yeah, let's talk offensive line here for a moment, because that is obviously the biggest thing for this football team. They are going to have a major upgrade overall with that unit. Running the football, pass protection, that group is just going to have to be a lot better. I continue to be encouraged. I know the pads are not out, and as Sam Darnold said, that's something that we're going to have to wait for with seeing what the run game looks like. But just the way that guys are firing off the ball, it looks different. It passes the eye test this year. And I want to talk Jalen Sundell for just a second. Look, I don't know if he starts for this football team, but I think the Seahawks want him to. I think they want him to go get a job. We saw him play some first-team right guard again today, second day he's done that. He played a few snaps of the first team as a center today as well. They are giving him an opportunity to show what he can do. And the thing that just stands out with both him and Gray Zabel, the North Dakota State guys, there's just a different look when those guys come off the ball. You can see the athletic fluidity, getting to where they need to go. I can't wait till the pads come out, because I think both those guys are going to be country strong, getting guys to the turf. I'm really excited to see that, but I just think you're seeing a lot of emphasis on versatility from John Benton, and I think Jalen Sundell is kind of the ring child of that group right now in that regard, with his ability to play everywhere. See if you can get him on the field.
The other thing I like about the offensive line, Mike McDonald said during minicamp he'd like to get that unit settled sooner rather than later. It was one of my biggest complaints last year is, among many, is they just didn't settle on 5 last year and start to build that continuity. There's the 2 positions, center, right guard, that are still up in the air. But even I feel like the rotations are a lot more conservative this year. Yeah, exactly. We're seeing the same guys. We can't tell you exactly how those reps are broken down, but we're seeing the same guys in there. I feel like they're already ahead of where they were a year ago at figuring out who those 5 guys are going to be.
Mike McDonald has talked about this since OTAs. He didn't say, I have a timetable for having a right guard named, or if there's a center competition, which it looks like there very well may be right now. They don't have a timetable, but you have to believe that they're wanting to get that settled much earlier than last year. That was one of the big issues when you had Christian Haynes and Anthony Bradford still competing early in the season. You can't have that in the NFL. You've got to figure out who your guy is going to be, roll with them, and put everything you got into that player. The fact that Christian Haynes is still taking snaps at center, they're doing a number of different things, that tells you what they're doing in terms of trying to experiment to find that best 5. At some point, they're going to have to really hone in on where these guys are going to be playing at. On defense, look, Leonard Williams, Devin Witherspoon, those guys are always impressive on the field. But there's certainly some guys that have jumped out here these first couple days. I think we've got to talk D'Anthony Bell. And more from a big picture perspective. As you mentioned, he had the interception today on Sam Darnold, who just held onto the ball just a little too long. But D'Anthony Bell was really good in OTAs and minicamp, had a couple picks during that time as well. And this is a guy that Cleveland, when they played him the last 2 years, he doesn't have just good Pro Football Focus grades. Like, you watch the film, he was good. Yeah. And you wonder why Cleveland let him go, but it's the Cleveland Browns. I digress. I think he's a really good football player, but you've got Nick Emanwari, you've got Julian Love, you've got Kobe Bryant, all on this roster. Ty Okada, he's been playing with the 2s most of the time. And he's kind of a guy every year that gets forgotten a little bit, but this coaching staff loves Ty Okada. And Jarek Reed and A.J. Finley made some plays out there today, had some good coverage on a couple passes. I mean, somebody's going to get cut. You can't keep them all. And some of those guys are going to be swept up from other teams, because there's some really good safeties that are not going to make this football team. And just seeing what D'Anthony Bell's doing out there points to that depth.
It's amazing how that room's been rebuilt in just a little over a year. It was just 14 months ago. We were talking about Quandre and Jamal Adams being released and turning that whole thing over. We know Kobe Bryant entering the last year of his rookie deal. A lot of eyes on him. Is he a guy that the team is thinking about extending? Devin Witherspoon certainly spoke highly of Kobe Bryant today and what he sees from him and the juice that he brings to practice. And on that note, we did see some more juice today, I thought. Obviously, yesterday, a lot of half-speed stuff. These guys chomping at the bit to get their pads on. We'll see that sometime next week, and Devin Witherspoon talked about that today as well.
And speaking of Devin Witherspoon, I have to make sure to mention that I saw him blitz 3 times, and 2 of those he got pass deflections in the backfield. So Devin Witherspoon's still very good at blitzing. That has not changed. I want to close out this conversation, Dan, with a player that you and I both feel is being very undervalued on defense by a large percentage of the fan base. That's Tyrese Knight. Everybody's been talking about Ernest Jones, and rightfully so. Ernest Jones was great last year, almost 100 tackles in 10 games for the Seahawks. But Tyrese Knight was a big part of the reason that they were able to make that improvement in the second half, playing next to Ernest Jones. And there was one play today, and you were watching a different position on this play than what I was, but Tyrese Young is one of the faster receivers on this team. He's a legitimate low 4.4 guy, and he's quick. He had really good agility testing scores. I was watching Tyrese Knight running stride for stride with him across the middle in man coverage, and it was incredibly impressive. You could see the coaches clapping afterwards because you knew Sam Darnold wanted to go there on that play. He wanted to throw the ball to Tyrese Young going over the middle, but guess what? 48 said absolutely not happening. No. I think he is a guy a lot of people are sleeping on. I don't know why. Slept on him last year. I just think he's a really underrated football player that has a chance to be a big part of this defense's success this year.
Yeah, and a lot of times when you don't talk about a player, it's because the player isn't doing anything to prompt that conversation. Yeah. Sometimes it means maybe they're not playing that well. I think it's the opposite with Tyrese Knight, kind of like an umpire in baseball, right? If you don't hear his name throughout the game, it means he's doing a good job.
Yep.
He just, as a guy who the book on him coming out of UTEP in college was he's raw, he's going to need a lot of development. But here we are just a year later, and he just seems to be a guy that's in the right place at the right time, understands his scheme, and I think there's big things ahead for Knight.
And that's also in the blitzing category. I thought he was fantastic when Mike McDonald sent him after the quarterback last year, and Mike McDonald loves to do that. He did it in Baltimore. Both his inside linebackers, Queen and Smith, blitzed a lot. That's a big part of the equation on defense. Before we head out here from the VMAC, Dan, real quick, what are you going to be watching in tomorrow's third practice, which will be open to fans? What is something you think fans should be taking a close look at? We know the pads aren't going to be out yet, but what is something those up in the berm should be paying close attention to in this third practice?
I'll talk about one thing that we didn't get a chance to get to today and that I know we both agree on. Jalen Milroe is a different player today than the one I saw at Mobile, Alabama the week of the Senior Bowl. You can tell he's been putting in the work and the work is paying off. And if you showed up here today and you didn't know what his backstory was, you didn't know what the knocks on him were coming out of Alabama as a guy with some mechanical issues and some challenges in the short to intermediate game, you would not think that's the case.
Yep.
You'd be asking about who's the third guy out here because he looks really talented. He just looks like a different player. His mechanics are better, his footwork and his base. And the result of that is he's delivering the ball on time. He's putting it where it belongs. Very, very few instances where receivers have had to either turn behind or reach up. He's been really, really good, and I think that's encouraging. And not to let fans get ahead of themselves, because I still think the plan the Seahawks have here is a long-term plan, and it involves 3 quarterbacks on the roster, so you just don't have to worry about putting Milroe into a game before he's ready. But you can't help but be encouraged by the progress you're seeing out of him. So watch for that tomorrow.
Yeah, and as far as what I think fans should be watching, of course I'm going to mention running backs, being a former running back coach. But look, you got to watch Ken Walker III and Zach Charbonnet. Those two guys look outstanding. And I know this is the time of year that guys like to say I'm in the best shape of my life. Those two guys are in the best shape of their life, and they are running like it. I know the pads aren't out yet, but there were some plays today where guys were just trying to pursue them, and the pursuit angles ended up being really bad because these guys are both explosive. Zach Charbonnet ripped off a 40-yard run that was like that. He looks a little leaner, faster. Ken Walker III looks thicker, but in a good way. Hasn't missed leg day, and looks like he's been squatting a couple small houses this offseason. So I would pay close attention to those running backs if you're going to be out here on the berm tomorrow at training camp. For Emerald City Spectrum, I'm Corbin Smith. For Seahawks Forever, he's Dan Viens. Thanks for tuning in.